What matters in this transcript is not the dramatic wording, but the operational system behind it, because the Apache mission around Hormuz is described as a continuous interception cycle, not isolated attacks. If this scenario is accurate, the American objective is clear. Keep the Strait of Hormuz open by maintaining a persistent airborne response screen against Iranian drones threatening ships, bases, and oil traffic. The AH-64 Apache is presented here not as a conventional land war support helicopter, but as a rapid response hunter integrated with radar ships, forward bases, deck standby positions, and constant maintenance support. That distinction matters because the helicopter's real strength is not just firepower, but how quickly it can be inserted into a larger sensor-to-shooter loop already watching the strait. The transcript keeps emphasizing launch, patrol, interception, return, rearm, and relaunch, because this is a readiness battle. And readiness is what determines whether repeated drone harassment becomes strategically effective. Drone pressure rarely succeeds through one perfect strike alone. It succeeds through persistence, timing, and cumulative disruption, especially in a choke point where shipping confidence is almost as important as physical security. That is why the American response described here is built around continuity. The goal is not one dramatic engagement, but a sustained pattern of aerial availability that reduces Iranian opportunities over time. In military terms, the real contest is between interruption and continuity. Iran tries to create repeated disruption windows, while the United States tries to close those windows before they produce useful strategic effects. The transcript suggests shipboard radar is the first step in that defensive chain, meaning the Apache does not search blindly but is cued into action by a broader detection network. That network matters because helicopters alone have surveillance limits, especially over water where targets can appear small, fast, low, and difficult to classify without outside assistance. So the helicopter becomes dangerous not just because of its weapons, but because it receives timely information and can move rapidly toward the threat once the alert is issued. That is why the text repeatedly shows helicopters on ship decks, helicopters in patrol zones, and helicopters rotating from land bases. It is describing layered readiness, not simple flight activity. Layered readiness increases flexibility, because one Apache can already be airborne when another is still on deck, while others are being serviced or prepared for the next mission cycle. If that system works smoothly, Iranian drones become less useful strategically, because they are intercepted before they can reach tankers, American bases, Allied facilities, or vulnerable naval formations. So when the transcript says blockade is no longer possible, the deeper military meaning is not perfect safety, but reduced Iranian ability to sustain successful disruption in the strait. That distinction is important. A blockade does not need total control to hurt traffic. It only needs enough credible danger to frighten operators, raise costs, and shake confidence repeatedly. The American mission described here seems designed to attack exactly that problem by making drone attacks less reliable, less survivable, and less useful as a tool of maritime intimidation. That is why the tempo of the cycle matters so much. Detect faster, launch faster, intercept sooner, rearm quicker, and return to station before the next threat wave develops. The side that preserves a faster operational cycle usually gains the advantage in this kind of drone defense contest, especially when the attacking systems are cheaper and easier to replace. The transcript's strongest analytical point is therefore not the Apache itself, but the network supporting it. Radar warning, deck launch procedures, land-based servicing, and replacement aircraft delivered by airlift. The maintenance scenes are especially important because they reveal what really sustains aerial dominance in a high-pressure corridor. Combat persistence begins on the ground, not only in the air. Ground crews refuel the helicopters, reload weapon systems, inspect components, and prepare the aircraft for immediate reuse, because one delayed turnaround can create an opening in patrol coverage. That is why the transcript spends so much time on rearming details. It is telling the viewer that sortie generation, not just pilot skill, is the real engine of this mission. The chain gun matters because it is practical for close-range engagements against relatively fragile drones, once contact is confirmed and the aircraft is in a proper firing position. Hydra rocket pods show that the helicopter is being armed for flexible use, not just one narrow task, because rockets can support broader engagement needs in a mixed and fast-changing battle space. Hellfire missiles are not the first choice for every drone encounter, but their presence signals readiness for larger targets, more complex engagements, or secondary mission requirements beyond small aerial threats. This layered armament suggests the Apache force is being prepared for a wide threat envelope, not merely a narrow anti-drone mission repeated under ideal conditions. That makes sense around Hormuz because the environment is mixed. Drones, fast craft, coastal launch zones, support boats, and surprise attacks can all overlap in a compressed operating space. The helicopter therefore functions as part of a flexible response package, able to patrol, intercept, support, and help stabilize the immediate tactical picture when new threats appear suddenly. Still, The transcript keeps returning to the same central idea. This operation depends on keeping enough aircraft ready at all times to avoid a gap in American response. That is where the C-17 delivery becomes especially important. Bringing in another Apache by airlift suggests planners are thinking beyond today's patrols and preparing for sustained operational strain. Airlifting a helicopter into theater is not only about replacement. It is about preserving fleet density so the interception network does not thin out after wear, maintenance demands, or combat losses. The Apache arriving by C-17 is therefore a sign of logistical depth. It shows that the rear support structure is actively protecting the forward patrol cycle from gradual decline. This is one of the most important analytical points in the entire story. Tactical dominance in Hormuz depends on logistical replacement just as much as on successful engagements in the air. The unloading sequence reveals how much effort stands behind one extra helicopter entering the mission. Components removed for transport must be handled, restored, reattached, tested, armed, and cleared carefully. Rotor blades, tail assembly, pylons, avionics sections, and weapons all require deliberate reinstallation because damage or error in that process could destroy the aircraft's reliability in combat. That means the real story is not simply helicopter firepower. It is the industrial and logistical effort required to keep helicopter firepower present in the right place every day. Strategic transport extends tactical air operations by ensuring that maintenance backlogs, unavailable airframes, or unexpected losses do not immediately reduce patrol coverage over the strait. In effect, the C-17 does not fight Iranian drones directly, but it keeps the anti-drone system alive by preserving aircraft numbers and restoring the depth needed for continuous rotation. The transcript wants the viewer to see that the patrol cycle is not fragile or temporary. It is being reinforced from the rear so it can absorb strain and keep functioning. Once the replacement Apache is assembled, armed, tested, and cleared, it becomes more than one aircraft. It becomes another available node inside the larger response network around Hormuz. That matters because the American side must think in terms of sustained coverage, not isolated victories. One successful intercept helps, but coverage gaps are what Iran would be looking to exploit. Iran's most realistic path in this kind of contest is not necessarily to defeat every helicopter in direct combat, but to exhaust the readiness cycle over time through persistent pressure. That pressure could come from repeated launches, varied drone profiles, timing changes, combined attacks, or attempts to force helicopters into constant response until the support system begins to slow. This is why the readiness loop matters more than the dramatic language of panic or domination. The real issue is whether enough Apaches can stay armed, fueled, and mission-capable every day. The shipboard launch posture supports that objective by reducing reaction time. Helicopters already parked on naval decks can lift off quickly once the radar warning comes through. That shortens the engagement chain because aircraft do not always need to launch from distant land bases before entering the threat zone. Forward deck positioning saves time where seconds matter. At the same time, land bases in the United Arab Emirates provide something ships cannot fully provide: deeper maintenance, larger weapon stocks, fuller repairs, and more complete turnaround capacity. So the system described here is dual-layered. Ships provide immediate response and forward readiness, while land bases provide endurance, reconstitution, and deeper logistical support behind the patrol cycle. That combination is strategically valuable because helicopters are maintenance-intensive platforms. They are powerful, but their usefulness falls quickly if support networks cannot keep pace with operational demand. The transcript clearly understands that point, which is why maintenance crews are shown almost as often as pilots. The combat image is built on the labor of rearmament and restoration. Every refilled ammunition drum, every mounted missile, every secured rocket pod, and every check system is part of a larger attempt to keep patrol density stable over time. If patrol density stays stable, Iranian drone attacks lose some of their strategic value because fewer drones survive long enough to create fear, damage, or market disruption in the strait. That is the deeper meaning of the blockade claim. It does not mean threats disappear. It means threats fail often enough that they no longer change shipping behavior decisively. This is a psychological and economic battle as much as a military one, because commercial traffic through Hormuz depends heavily on confidence in continuous protection. If tanker operators and regional partners believe interception remains reliable, then maritime flow continues. If confidence collapses, disruption succeeds even without a large number of successful Iranian strikes. So, the Apache mission described here is not just a combat mission. It is also a confidence preservation mission designed to reassure everyone watching the waterway. The repeated launch-return rearm cycle sends a message. There is always another helicopter ready, another crew prepared, and another intercept possible before drones can shape the environment. That message is aimed not only at Iranian planners but also at shipping firms, insurers, allied capitals, and military partners whose decisions depend on whether Hormuz still looks governable under pressure. Still, the system described here would have limits. Helicopters are not invulnerable, and continuous operations create fatigue, maintenance strain, and vulnerability to adaptation by a determined opponent. If Iran increased drone volume sharply, changed flight patterns, coordinated with other systems, or forced simultaneous alerts across wider areas, the Apache screen could be pressured significantly. That does not mean the system would fail immediately, but it means dominance should be understood as managed control, not absolute immunity from risk or surprise. The transcript should therefore be read as an argument about reducing Iranian effectiveness, not eliminating Iranian capability completely. The mission is to blunt disruption below a decisive threshold. In other words, the operation is designed to make Iranian attacks too unreliable to close the corridor psychologically, economically, or militarily for any sustained period. That is why the replacement airframe, the maintenance crews, the shipboard radar, the armed deck alerts, and the turnaround process all matter as much as the airborne firing itself. The deeper story is one of integration. Detection, launch, interception, recovery, rearmament, and replacement are being fused into one continuous defensive mechanism around a critical maritime choke point. If that mechanism remains intact, then the United States can keep contesting every drone wave before it accumulates enough success to threaten broader control of the strait. If the mechanism begins to slow, thin out, or lose aircraft density, then Iran gains room to test gaps, create uncertainty, and turn repeated harassment into something more strategically damaging. So the central question is not whether Apaches can shoot drones down. The central question is whether enough Apaches can stay ready, connected, and sustainable long enough to keep Hormuz functioning. That is the true meaning of dominance in this script. Not dramatic conquest, but the ability to keep responding, keep replacing, keep intercepting, and deny disruption through constant operational continuity. In the end, the transcript presents the Apache mission around Hormuz as a battle of endurance, cycle speed, and confidence preservation more than a battle of pure firepower alone. And if that interpretation is correct, then the real American advantage here is not one helicopter or one engagement, but a larger system designed to keep the strait open under persistent pressure.